So I thought that I would spend a little bit of time on this archive from 2010 to show you a little bit of and to probably lead to more discussion of what dance can do, what theatre could do, what visual arts could do in terms of building a society that we want to live in, not just accepting that this is a society that we have inherited. So I hope that it's not too boring, and I'll start to just go through some of the images.
Can you please open the curtains?
I was trying to run a video of, which is actually on YouTube, of Cambodian classical dancers working with a Lebanese sound artist, and basically he had put sound pads all over the floor, and the dancers were, through their classical dance, interacting with the sound pads on the floor. And they then, through their classical dance, created this contemporary sound work. And I'm not sure whether, let's see whether we can. So this music is created by their bodies and by their dance, interacting with the sound design. You can see some of these sound pads on the floor. So as they step, it triggers certain sounds, and these are the sounds that we hear. Right? Okay, so that's telling us, that's it. Let's just go into the images. But this was just, I thought that it would be interesting to give you all just a sense of not just stills, but some video. But I think it's too complex to run it live. So okay, so I'm just going to show you all my very messy desktop. And so what we did in Cambodia, can you all hear me without a microphone? I think it's a bit disturbing with the microphone, right? Can you all hear me upstairs? It's all right?
No problem.
Yeah. Okay, so sorry. So what we did in Cambodia was that we were a group of like maybe about 20 international artists which visited and worked with the Cambodian participants, and then we traveled together. So the idea was to travel through the country together, and in the process of traveling, we are every day learning from each other and sharing information and sharing knowledge. So it was a kind of a traveling university or traveling project where learning is not happening in studios or classrooms, but it's more happening as we live together. So as we swim together, as we tuk-tuk together, as we go to the Angkor Wat, and part of the process was to actually try to be in a kind of enchanted space, to be together and not to have a clear teacher, student, or foreigner, local relationship. And here we were visiting a gallery, which is called Rayon Gallery, and in this spectrum of people, you have Nelly Ziwei. She's a choreographer from Johannesburg. Hu Fang is from Guangzhou in China, and he's a curator. Lee Darabut is a visual artist from Cambodia. Tim Achos is from England. He's a theatre director. And there's Manuel Palmos, who's from Romania, and he's a choreographer. So what happens through the 2 weeks that we're traveling together, we visit art spaces, but we also start to hold kind of discussions together. And you see here a discussion, and we had two centers, two bases in Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. And in the two bases, one was a dance group, Amrita, which is full of young dancers, what we will call in kind of a European American context as emerging dancers. They were mostly just graduated or still in the final year of the university. And this was one base, and the other base was actually a very fascinating archive called Bopana. And Bopana is an archive where a Cambodian filmmaker is trying to collect all the images that he can find, both still and moving, even from the 19th century, from the Lumiere brothers. And he's actually talking to both the French and the Cambodian governments to support this whole process of collecting the still and moving image and making it into this archive. And it's a fascinating project because you see all the war documentaries, you see all the propaganda films of the Civil War, you see Pol Pot's cruelty. All this is in the archive, and we were based also in the archive with film and young visual artists from Cambodia. So we had these two centers, and every day we were moving. Like in the morning we were with the dance base, and then in the afternoon we moved to the archive base where we were working with filmmakers and visual artists. And in the process of their day, these young artists and students were moving back and forth, so already melting the borders between the genres. And this is the kind of work that I believe a lot in, that there is no such thing as a dance platform, but that we are in an interdisciplinary space. There's no such thing as a biennale or biennale, because we are in an interdisciplinary space. And so you can see here, there were about 25 young dancers, and they were listening to a project by two Europeans who are from ex-Yugoslavia. They were from Slovenia, and it's very interesting because they've done a conceptual art project where they have changed their names by deep poll to become, to take on the last president's name. So if you imagine two Sri Lankans changing their names to Bandaranaike, and actually the full name of the president. So this project is called I'm Janez Jansa, and Janez Jansa was an ex-president of Slovenia. So it's always a kind of a shock, because they are like two twins, and they constantly call themselves by the president's or the ex-president's name. And it's a kind of conceptual project where they are, in a sense, kind of making fun, I think, of authorities, and also the question of what is in a name. That before you've entered the space, people already know that you're a Muslim, people already know that you're a Tamil, or people already know that you are the other. And this was in the archive, and here we have Ashok Sukumaran, who is a visual artist based in Mumbai. And you can see the complete difference, right? The sense of the body, it's really like, it's packed with bodies, and then suddenly you're in a kind of clean, conceptual space of the video projection. And as I said, it's a kind of space where there are different disciplines moving through. And this is Zul. Zul is a sound artist from Singapore, and Cambodian translators. We had a lot of fun with the translators, because the translators are themselves young students in communication, and they were the ones who really showed us Cambodia. And in a sense, you had this kind of constant interface of constant translation, the translation of our foreign experience to the Cambodian friends, and the translation of the Cambodian experience to the visitors. And Zul here was working with the motorcycle and connecting a sound system to the motorbike. So the motorbike started to make sound, and to actually create a whole kind of score, because it's connected to certain triggers in a sound machine. These were two dancers from Istanbul, Mustafa and Phyllis. And you can see that in a way we are in such a complex space of culture, because you have these kind of classical dancers who are trained in Cambodian classical court dance, and then you have kind of dance from so many parts of the world coming in, and also the way in which the bodies were interacting, right? Both gendered bodies and non-gendered bodies. And we also had a lot of discussions all through the time together, because we also believe there's a place where you have the body muscle, but also the intellectual muscle is working. So we were talking a lot about what can dance be in a new society, right? Because Cambodia is coming out of civil war and has been for the last 30 years. But what is particularly interesting is that each young Cambodian is usually doing 3 university courses. He's doing English, he's doing computer studies, and he's doing computer skills, and he's doing architecture, for example. So this very complex kind of rebuilding of society after a civil war, and that it takes so long, right? I mean, people talk about how post-Bush in the States, the US has been set back maybe 30 years. All the civil rights movements were set back 30 years, and so Obama's 4-year term means nothing, right? And now he's going to go on into a second term. But a sense of like the rebuilding, which I'm sure that all of you are part of here in Sri Lanka, is going to be a very complex process. And how can we artists or just individuals, people to people rebuilding? How do we rebuild these bonds which have collapsed and which politicians have taken over, right? Politicians have decided what our relationships should be, but how do we rebuild our people-to-people relationships? And one of the beliefs is that through a project like this, like an artist laboratory, that as we travel through, we make some kind of very small difference. And you can see how the young Cambodian dancers are just listening to Yanis Yansha from Slovenia, and a lot of a sense that you are in a very complex space. It's not a space which is very structured. You don't have a curriculum of today let's learn how to stand. Tomorrow let's learn how to fall. The next day let's learn how to kick. It's not this kind of very structured curriculum, but a sense of being thrown into a complexity of life where I don't understand what you're talking about, but I have to find a way to swim through this very complex cross currents. And we have Esther Zalamon. She's a Hungarian dancer, contemporary dancer based in Berlin. And you see that there was so much hunger and so much curiosity, because you were dealing with knowledge that's, I think the knowledge in our world today is so controlled, right? Because knowledge is so much structured that you have access to this knowledge and another person doesn't have. So contemporary dance is not for you, a Cambodian classical dancer, but contemporary dance is for somebody else. So this kind of structuring of knowledge and information we try to break. We try to say that knowledge is there for everybody, and that we have this space in the 2 weeks to be free to find our affinities with knowledge, so that I can be an accountant, but suddenly I find that this thing about short film is really interesting, for example, and usually film knowledge is given to certain people and not necessarily given to an accountant. So we try to open up these kind of channels in the time and space that the world that we're trying to build. So these are just images of how constantly the young Cambodians and ourselves, how we were interacting and interfacing with each other. This is Nelly Siwin, who's a Johannesburg dancer, and she was working with some kind of interactive space with the audience. And of course, Cambodian classical dance is not interactive, right? It's not interactive in the sense of Kandyan ritual in a Parahara, for example, but it's very structured. There is no interaction between the audience and them. You are on a proscenium stage, or you are in a ritual space. You are in a different space from the public. and Nelly was basically working with her body and with this kind of interaction in the space. That's her. And as I said, what we did was that we brought projectors, we brought whatever we needed to set up a camp. And what we will do in Myanmar, for example, is that we try to actually also to kind of build these bridges which have collapsed. So for example, we're working with a film festival in Yangon, and we are bringing the film festival to Mandalay. So the idea of trying to make these local centers connect. They're already there, but they have no money to make the connection. So as a kind of international artist project, we make these connections a little bit more possible. So as I said, what we did was that we also invited the young Cambodians to travel with us around the country. And every day during the breakfast, during the pool, during the general daily movement, there is all sorts of interactions happening. This is Jekyll is a hip hop artist from Jakarta. Kanida is a designer, is a fashion designer from Cambodia, and it's Zul again. So, all along the way, we were still making bodily expressions and explorations. And here, the Cambodian dancers are working. Phyllis, who is one of the Turkish Istanbul dancers, working on expression of the face, and perhaps some people say similar to Kathakali rasas, but Phyllis is not Indian, and she's working with finding her own space through these facial expressions. And here you see a little bit of this sound sensor, which Tarek Aturi, the Lebanese sound artist, was building all over the floor. And this very complex kind of design that he made of a kind of a sound network on the floor, which was then connected up. And the Cambodian, this is a monkey dance, it's Hanuman actually, and he's interacting with the sound sensors on the ground. So every time they stamp, every time they jump, it starts to trigger different things. And even the very lyrical movement of Sida, the Sida character, is also triggering certain sound waves as she caresses the space. So the Cambodians had lots of fun with this, and as I said, we had a kind of a constant process, because we were also traveling through the country. So we would go to a village temple pavilion, and we would listen to funeral music. So what we had to do was that, and that was part of my role, that I would connect up with different groups, and this is a group of actually, it's called Cambodian Living Arts, and it's looking at endangered or art forms that were becoming extinct, and trying to support the masters, the old gurus, and trying to find a way to actually encourage young people to learn from these gurus. And funeral music is something which nobody's interested in anymore. You're interested in new life. You're not thinking about these cultures of funeral music. So Cambodian Living Arts, which is an NGO in Cambodia, is working with all these kind of art forms which are almost dying, and encouraging young people to learn from them. So we visited them, and you can see how this is one of the musicians. You can see how the exchange is happening. Right? There's Manuel is a choreographer from Bucharest, and he's talking with Ratana. Ratana is actually very interesting. He's a young lawyer who's decided to work as a human rights filmmaker. So these kinds of conversations were happening, and not about art, not about film, not about dance, but just about a daily thing that they were involved in. And in a sense, what we were doing also was we were just kind of like trying to encounter daily life in a village, in this pavilion. These are my indulgences. Sorry, these are my photographs of what it looks like in the pavilion. But these encounters, as I said, were ongoing as people traveled together. So Tim is a theatre director. He's a writer actually. Vladka is a video artist, and Chut is a Cambodian American whose family had gone to the US, and he made a personal journey back. So he's also trying to reconnect, and he's a poet. So in the Flying Circus and in this Alter You project, all of us are coming together from our different backgrounds and trying to find a world that we want to make together, or we want to make maybe back home in our own homeland. And here we are listening to wedding music in a village. And even the Cambodian artists, the Cambodian students, they are completely estranged from their cultures because they are living in the city. They don't know what this is about, and so for them it was equally an enriching experience of the unknown. And it's a very kind of relaxed space, right? So we take over the hotel and we start to make these kind of meetings on a daily basis with this is Hima Chong, who's a conceptual visual artist, and he works a lot with photographs and with kind of with creating stories and writing. And you can see here this chat again, and Danai is an anthropologist who's interested in music, in Cambodian music. And a lot of these young people are in many different fields because they usually have two careers, right? Nobody can be a dancer full-time or a filmmaker full-time. So some of them are tour guides, some of them are involved in communications or tourism boards, and they all have a master's degree. I found that really amazing that they have a master's degree, they have a bachelor's degree, they're trying to be an artist, they have also a daily life, a 9-to-5 job. And here Tim was making like maps. This was an exercise of trying to draw maps of the environment that we were in. And there were different sorts of maps. And these are all the different pieces of paper where they draw maps of memory, maps of heritage, maps of games, maps of love. This was a very popular map. A map of how to find love in a city. And it was very interesting. I mean, Tim said, for example, this is a map that we can sell, right? How to find love in your city. So and one of the last things that we did was what we called like tea tables, where we just made different tables in a large garden where we had different encounters happening through the afternoon. And this idea of what is art, what is life, what is work, what is play, what is tourism, what is daily life, all melting into one. And the idea of the Alter You project where you are in both leisure and work. You're thinking all the time, right? Because I think that when you are an artist, you are constantly making work as you live through your life. So the discussions are happening in a very fluid way, very organic, not so formal, and where we kind of dream together and travel together. Yeah, that's it.